Thank you very much, David, and welcome again to Strathclyde. And I am really, really happy to be here today. In a way, my mission here is to explain why this is not just a launch, but a relaunch. Some people in the earlier meeting said, I have heard about this center. Is it really just starting now? So I want to tell you a bit about the story of how we came here. I'll say a few things about where we are now, and then I will let Elisa, my colleague and co-director of the center, explain to you more about the vision and where we are going. So it was in 2012 when the center was established. At the time, the head of school was Professor Mark Pausty, an environmental lawyer, and Mark attracted to Strathclyde a number of colleagues, myself, Stephanie Switzer in the room in front of me, and Aileen McHarg. And the four of us, I remember, were sitting in that building in front of us, beautiful building as you can see, and we had this very informal chat where obviously Mark, as head of school, was extremely busy, so he had the idea, but then said, Francesco, do you want to lead it? And I said, obviously. So we decided to go for it, and it's been a fantastic journey. It has been a fantastic journey that has very much allowed us to become very much part of the university. I mean, David's word, you know, I'm very happy you say that, but I really believe that the center throughout this first, say, 5 years has really shown that we are about multidisciplinarity, we are about linking with other partners, be it the Center for Energy Policy, be it the environmental and the civil and environmental engineering. And we did a number of things which I'll highlight. But then in 2016, the university decided, and obviously we're very grateful, to invest in our area of interest in environmental and governance. Global Talent Initiative attracted Prof Elisa Morgera, and Elisa brought not just her team, but as she will explain, also her vision, which was shared obviously by many of us. And we do aim by 2020 to become a global player. We want to become a global center of excellence in this field. So at the time in 2012, there were 4 staff, there were 5 PhD researchers. We worked on several areas. I would say environmental justice, climate change and energy, water, trade and the environment were those areas that, let's say, we felt comfortable within. In 5 years, this has grown exponentially. So the numbers are quite interesting. At the same time, in those 5 years, we started a number of events, which you have there. Some of them were actually taking place tomorrow for the 5th time, the PG Colloquium, the CASP workshop, the Climate Change and Sustainability Project workshop, the 3rd edition next year. So, sorry, Friday. So we have a number of events that we have started, and a number of postgraduate programs, as you can see there. But what we are now, there are, and the numbers is actually 11, not 9 for some reason, but there are 25 of us. So, and I say us because as much as the next slide will have only the pictures of the staff because I couldn't fit everybody in, so I do apologize for our PhD researchers, but we do work as much as possible as a group. So PhD researchers, when possible and where possible, work with us. So when I say the center, I say everything from the professor to the PhD researcher. And 25 of us allow us now to cover 12 areas of expertise, which I will show you in the next slide. And we do a number of things, as you can see there, and as I said, some of them were there already in the first 5 years. We have enhanced our portfolio of postgraduate programs. In the folder that you have on your seat, you will find brochures of the LLM in Global Environmental and Governance, the Law of the Sea, Ocean, and Sustainable Development. Those are the 2 that are new and that will start in September. And you also have the 2 old ones. So this is us. As I said, we tried, because there was a picture taken at 2 o'clock. You all saw it because we're all making a mess there. But we were trying to retrieve it so we could put it, but we weren't able to do it on time. But this is the, let's say, the staff portfolio. But as I said, there are many, many more of us. These are our area of expertise. There are 12 of them. Some could be considered more sectorial, but others are very cross-cutting, say economic law, human rights. We touch upon areas around the sphere of environmental law and governance. One thing that characterizes us, and Elisa will say much more about it, but is that we are always looking for partners. We always work with partners. Some of them are linked to our previous experiences, working professionals, but others just happen because of the expertise that we have in-house and the possibilities that we have to work with these partners. I won't list them, you have them in front of you, and obviously the plea is always out. If you want to work with us, the door is always open, and the center is always happy to embrace new partnerships. This is just a few of the places where we have been in this last year. Leave aside our carbon footprint, which is something we're working on. We are global. One thing that we don't emphasize too much, but I think we should, is also that we have the possibility, for whatever reason, to go around the globe and contribute to debates in different languages as well. So we can go to Central America, Latin America, and contribute to policy debates in Spanish, or be it French, and so forth. And that is something that I think if you have whatever, the luck, let's say, to be able to do that, that allows you as a research center to have even more impact. So for example, now we are writing as a center together with other partners a policy brief in Spanish that has been translated by colleagues in Portuguese. And as much as our colleagues in Brazil speak English and talk in English, when they have something in their own language, they will digest it and they will see it in a different way. So it's a real pleasure to be at the center. I'm delighted to have Elisa as co-director, but it's not just about the numbers, which we're very happy of. They have increased, but it's really very exciting to be part of it because of the vision that we have for the future. And this is where I leave the floor to Elisa to continue.
As Francesco has conveyed, we are very excited to have found each other as a community of research and practice within the center. We're very excited that you are all here and maybe sharing with us some of the research challenges that we're facing and some of the solutions or options that we're hoping to identify, and that we will remain in contact and collaborate in different ways through time, and perhaps you will contribute to realize the vision we have set for ourselves. And I think one of the interesting things in the slide that Francesco just showed, the different areas of expertise, it's not just a privilege of having those very specialized and deep understanding of different areas of environmental law, which are increasingly subspecializing, but it's really the will among all our members to work together and to understand where there are cross-cutting questions arising in different areas, where there are lessons to be learned related to food and agriculture. They may have something to say to questions related to the oceans, really very much working across those sectors and having pleasure and learning from each other in that continuous exchange. The other thing that we're really interested in looking in each and every of those areas of expertise is thinking about multi-level dynamics and multi-level challenges. Many of us are international environmental lawyers, but as we have seen this afternoon, thinking about the challenges arising from Brexit, we need to understand possible dynamics and also creative interactions between international, EU, other regional bodies of environmental law, as well as national and local legal initiatives, as well as the role of non-state actors such as indigenous peoples, private companies, transnational legal advisors, and their role in shaping our understanding and our practice of law and very much the evolving of environmental law across all these levels. Strathclyde, I think, has been a very good home. Well, for one thing, I think the whole meeting of like-minded approaches to the role of environmental regulation in addressing global and local environmental challenges, and the idea of investing in this center as a view to then supporting colleagues across the university in other disciplines, and very much working together as a inter or transdisciplinary efforts. And I think that's something that we're all very much interested. We may all have experienced to some extent or other, but that I think remains a challenge and something that one keeps growing into and learn more and more from, once again, across sectors as well. One of the ambitions we have is also that of shaping the agenda, the research agenda. It's not something that we want to do on our own, but it's part and parcel of that ongoing dialogue among areas of environmental regulation and working with practitioners and with colleagues in other disciplines, really understanding what are the bottlenecks out there, where the law is an issue, it's a problem, where it may be a solution, and really very much targeting our research to responding to those needs as soon as they arise, and working together with others in making sure that that's not just a challenge that we take upon ourselves as a center, but where we involve other environmental law scholars through collaborative research endeavors. And I have put on the slide 2 recent books that we have cooperating in coordinating. One has to do with the intersection between international economic, environmental, and human rights law in as far as natural resources are concerned. Some of our colleagues, but also scholars in other universities, have contributed to that. And the whole idea of the book was finding out specific research questions that still require more work. So it's really about setting a research or refining the research agenda in that area. And similarly for our work on biodiversity law, an area in which many of the members of the center, I think almost all, have contributed, but where again we have engaged with colleagues across the globe to bring together very specific key questions that may have to do with gender and biodiversity protection, may have to do with renewables and the biobase, and really finding out where we need to go with research, where there is a need for us to push in the boundaries and support actors out there in looking at questions that have to do with environmental sustainability as well as with the human dimension, so with equity questions and different views about what nature is and what equity sides to a dilemma there may be. Part of our work is also about understanding how different groups and different stakeholders may see the environment, may see some of what knowledge is, and also looking at how we may see use in the environment and what that may, what kind of challenges and questions, and perhaps not just legal questions, but also normative and ethical questions are out there. And some of the work we've discussed yesterday at the event that opened our Festival of Environmental Law and Governance, building on Saskia's work, is very much, again, pushing the boundaries of our knowledge, thinking about the areas of law that we are well familiar with and are quite consolidated, even if there many challenges remain there, and thinking even further into frontier resources that we may now starting to think or to explore and exploit, be that in outer space, in the depths of the oceans, or perhaps under the crust of the earth. And how we want to do this, I think that has really been the vision behind the center, is this idea that we can be and we should be more than the sum of our individual efforts. That by having an embedded dialogue, which is very much about peer learning from younger researchers to more established ones, from one research area to another, this is the only way for us to really push those boundaries, building on each other's work and helping each other along. And that has some practical, of course, an ideal side to it, but it also has a very pragmatic dimension. It has to do with supporting the younger generations. I'm unfortunately now in the position to identify that as something I'm no longer part of, but really very much thinking about how the problems out there are so complex that our educational system needs to rise to that challenge and needs to provide not just the sources and the knowledge, but really build those skills for our undergraduate and postgraduate students, and very much having them work with us on some of the challenges that we are facing. So very much thinking about how in our engagement with external partners, be that through consultancies and pro bono work, our students can be partners in that, and can also already within the university start building their CV and build global networks that will certainly, and we have very good examples here in the room of how that has really helped jumpstart their career and give them opportunities to become a very important and valuable voice in different environmental debates. At the same time, it's really about us being attuned to reality, being alerted to research needs, and to what our role in society should be very much truthful to the spirit of Strathclyde University, and working with stakeholders with a view to continuously challenge whether our research is clear enough, is helpful enough, is targeted enough for it to be taken on board by others and actioned upon. So in that light, I'm just going to highlight some of the things that we're currently doing and that we're hoping first show that this vision is more than just good words, but is actually a practice that we have already started, and also can indicate some direction for where we wish to go, perhaps in the next 5 years and more. We have at the moment 4 externally funded research projects. One is Bottlenecks, which is the one that has brought, I think, for me, my first experience of the collaborative peer learning approach. And it has to do really with a broad question of how international law has evolved in the area of biodiversity, climate change, food and agriculture, and oceans, with a view to address questions that have to do with equity and sustainability and with the respect for human rights. And out of that, and I think that has proven that that approach, for how much has been challenging and I think a very steep learning curve, certainly for me, and I think thanks to the patience of my colleagues, we have all come quite a long way, has also shown how fruitful that is and how much recognition we have received from stakeholders, from the local level, from NGOs supporting local and indigenous communities, to colleagues working in the UN supporting intergovernmental negotiations on questions that may seem very far from each other, such as mining in indigenous people's lands for lithium, to developing a new regime for life in the oceans, and yet share some fundamental questions about the role and limitations of law in addressing those questions. And so the other 3 projects you see there are somehow brainchilds of Bottlenecks. They take on some of those ideas and experiences. They help us also spread the burden of that perhaps even too fast-growing research agenda that we have contribute to shape, and have particularly focused on marine, which is an area that we are growing as well, working on oceans-related challenges, as well as working with colleagues where we have quite an important, I think, community of practitioners and scholars here in Scotland, the work on ecosystem services and the link and opportunities for poverty alleviation. Moving on, we've also, even if as a team we have consolidated over the summer, in the last 6 months, we've been nicely overwhelmed with opportunities to collaborate with other international partners. And we have at the moment 5 ongoing international consultancies, some on related aspects, and very much to do with our role, the role of academia in contributing to making an understanding, a workable understanding of international law available to those actors on the ground and then are in charge of implementing it. So creating capacity building tools to bring international law home, to understand to what extent perhaps fragmented and complicated developments in international law need to come together into a coherent and workable framework for action at the regional, national, and local level. A lot has to do with training, be that through tools that explain and clarify the stage at which the law is, which should be a basic point, but quite a complex one in our ever-evolving landscape of global environmental law, and understanding in working directly with colleagues on the ground, what are the challenges, what are the questions that needs perhaps more clarification or that need further work. Also, again, thinking about how it is that we embed peer learning and peer review in our work as an everyday modality. And that's really something that perhaps lawyers are learning from the hard sciences, from the natural sciences. And again, Strathclyde is a good home. And I think one of the things that I found most interesting in my also dialogue with the principal is this idea that talking about labs, talking about incubators made a lot of sense to him, although perhaps not necessarily so much to other lawyers. And this idea of building teams within our team where we will be joining forces and putting our heads and brains together in looking at certain questions, not necessarily to jointly publish or develop one common research project, but building on each other's work and perhaps as research is in progress, contributing to others' progress in their own research journey and take ideas and inspiration for our own work. So very much teamwork, but of quite a dynamic and also flexible way that allows for the individual members to keep their individual voice loud and clear, but being supported and nourished by the work and the struggle sometimes of other colleagues. So the Global Environmental Law Lab, I think in some ways is quite nicely established. It builds and feeds from the Benelux project, but perhaps even more exciting than that, 2 incubators are also being developed as we speak. One is very much building on Francesco's ongoing work on transboundary aquifers, and many of our colleagues here, also among our PhD students, are part and parcel of that very lively effort. And then another is really very much based on Saskia's work, looking at those frontier resources at questions of global commons. And again, I think we're very heartened to see that this approach is very much something that outside stakeholders can see themselves be an active part of. And Francesco's work with UNESCO, IUCN, and others, the endorsement that Saskia's lab received from the British Geological Survey, and the very exciting discussions we've had about how we can help addressing some of the questions that have arisen outside of legal work, but inevitably bring and need to bring law into conversation, is really a good signal that that's definitely a way worth pursuing and exploring to the fullest. And this is really just to conclude and say, well, there's much more that we could possibly cover in this event. We have 2 major events coming up that again show how we want to bring academia and practice together, and how we want to push the boundaries of what we understand legal research and environmental law research is about. One is a 2-day symposium that we'll organize in early September this year, very much looking at how do we study, how do we understand global environmental law? How is it that we need to work to understand those tensions and linkages between international, regional, national, subnational, and transnational environmental law? How do we understand non-state actors in that process? And do we need to change the way we teach? Do we need to change the methodologies we engage? Do we need to think much more deeply about our own roles as actors in those uses and understandings of environmental law, and do we need to understand perhaps how there may be agendas and strategic uses of certain environmental practices. So a very exciting event, which of course, as I explained, I mean, to me as a researcher, raises quite a lot of interesting areas for future work. But again, what was illuminating for me was seeing the interest from practitioners out there wanting to participate and hear what is it as academics we're really working on in very futuristic terms in some ways. And so I'm pleased to announce that both a representative, a legal officer from UN Environment Program has volunteered to participate and steer some of our discussions with a view to think how UNEP, the UN main agency related to environmental law, may wish to take on board some of our thinking. And also the UN Special Rapporteur on the Right to Food, Professor Ilal Helver, which we have pleasure to meet here in Scotland, and who may be quite an important force in local debates here, but also globally. She's also quite keen to participate and see how we can all wrap our heads around the complexity of the law and how working those complexity we can push forward an environmental agenda. And the second big event will be in July 2018. It's really very much something that the original SCELG team should be proud of, having been part of a global competition to be hosting the IUCN Academy of Environmental Law annual colloquium. So quite a big event, which usually involves early stage and more consolidated environmental law researchers literally from across the globe. I think one of the events where we really have an impressive representation from all regions. And the theme that has been selected is a very challenging one. It's again about pushing the boundaries of what environmental law is and how it needs to be used and developed. That has to do with technology and innovation, risk and resilience. And not necessarily just in a very technocratic way, but really thinking about how different actors and knowledge systems, how different perceptions of risk and resilience need to be understood and come in a conversation for us to think as deeply as we can and perhaps as creatively as we can about the role of environmental law in research and in practice. So with that, I think I'll leave you with our contacts. We are being also very present online and through social media, and hopefully that's a good way to stay in touch with what we're up to. But we are, as Francesco said, very much open to hear whether there are opportunities and ideas that you think may find resonance in what we're trying to do, and otherwise just to share what we learn, be that perhaps things that we could do better and things that appear to be quite successful for other researchers to engage as well. So with that, I think I'll leave the floor and I'll introduce actually our keynote speaker, and just to explain also how the choice came about. I think for a relaunched research center, looking at the very interesting initiatives and the forward-looking approach that the Sabin Center on Climate Change Law at Columbia Law School has taken is very much an inspiration. And also I think Michael Gerard, his work is very much at the interface of research and practice. We were also slightly pushy, I hope Michael didn't mind, in suggesting a possible topic for his talk that would allow us as a reaction to his keynote to perhaps complement with some of the areas of expertise that we have present in the center. So I'll leave the floor to Michael. He'll talk about legal tools to force corporate adaptation to climate change, focusing on environmental impact assessment, energy regulation, and license conditions. There will be time after his talk for questions from the floor, and we very much look forward to hearing from Michael and think how these themes very much confirm, I think, some of our intuitions about what we hope to do in our own work, and perhaps also open up further areas for collaboration.